some people are already connected in on the webinar.
More complex was more complex.
Hi everybody, it's now 2 p.m. here, which means it's 9 a.m. in Brazil. So let us start this first partnership meeting between Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, the University of Lille, and the Institut Pasteur de Lille. I'm Didier Gosset, professor of medicine, former dean of the Faculty of Medicine, and currently the advisor to the university president for the international partnerships. I'm very glad to welcome you today and to introduce and moderate this webinar. I want to thank the French Embassy in Brazil for its support in establishing this collaboration, and particularly Nadège Mézier, who must be in this meeting right now, and all the team from the embassy. I also want to greet our consul of Brazil in Lille, Daniel Poulagnon, who is from Rio. First, we will have some opening remarks from the presidents and directors of the three institutions. We will then have general presentations of what we are doing on the three topics that we have identified: infectious diseases, particularly HIV, inequalities in health and health systems, and innovation in health. Each speaker has 10 minutes to present and 5 minutes for discussion. Please be mindful of respecting the time. For the first speech, unfortunately, Professor Régis Bordet, president of the university, is unavailable. So let us start with our first vice president, Etienne Perrat, who is from the School of Political Sciences. Etienne.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I would like to, first of all, as Didier just said, apologize on behalf of the president, who unfortunately, due to some constraints related to the end of the academic year, could not attend today. And of course, he asked me to convey a few words of support for these partnerships. Maybe just to start, a very short reminder on what the University of Lille is exactly. This is a very ancient university, just to mention that since we are here, of course, with the Pasteur Institute of Lille. Lille was the place where everything started for Louis Pasteur, actually, in the middle of the 19th century, where he started his career as Dean of the Faculty of Sciences. And more recently, the University of Lille restructured in fundamental and sweeping ways in the last 10 years and is now one of the leading research and teaching universities in France. Second, that I wanted to emphasize is the fact that as part of our overall international and research strategy, we decided, and I would like to thank Didier and also Joseph Armando Soba, who is here with us today, even though you cannot see him. I would like to thank them for launching this dynamic of establishing strategic partnerships with key partners abroad. And in particular, they have already traveled different parts of the world, but one of the major elements they emphasized and we talked about here in Lille is the perspectives that exist in developing cooperation with Brazil and with leading research institutions in Brazil. This is a strategy that is particularly important in the field of health, and of course by health, as Didier just mentioned, we include very different dimensions, infectious diseases, and I think Professor Nassif will also mention that in a few minutes, since this is a very important part of the Pasteur Institute of Lille activity. But of course we consider connections between health, public health, other disciplines, also other fields of knowledge, and for a multidisciplinary university as the University of Lille, this is of course very important. I would like just to mention that as part of this strategy, we entered very recently a European alliance. This is part of the policy that is developed by the European Commission and the European Union in general, and we entered a European alliance which is focused on neurotechnologies, neurology, and this alliance is called Neurotech EU, and this is a very important strategic asset for the University of Lille. I would like just to conclude on the way that we are very happy to open this kickoff meeting, and of course we wish you very productive and very interesting exchanges today, discussions, and of course we are very much looking forward to a visit of the Fondation Osvaldo Cruz in November, which is taking place, I think. And so this kickoff meeting is actually starting this whole dynamic, and we look forward to signing an agreement and developing this cooperation. So thanks again for joining the seminar today. And I think now I will leave the floor to Professor Nassif. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Etienne. So now let's hear from Professor Xavier Nassif, who is Professor of Microbiology and Director of the Pasteur Institute in Lille.
Okay, thank you very much, Didier. And first of all, good morning or good afternoon, depending on the side of the Atlantic you are right now sitting on. And I just to say that this was for me a great pleasure when first Didier and Regis came to see me, asking whether we could link some of the University of Lille with some of our partners in the network. And I think this is a great use of the Pasteur network, which you know very well at the Fire Cruise. The Pasteur network is probably one of the very last, one of the biggest, and probably one of, maybe not the last, but one of the biggest academic networks throughout the world. And I think one of its mission is to allow collaboration between academic people, academic scientists from all over the part of the world. So I think this fits perfectly well with at least the idea on my philosophy of the Pasteur network. So, the other thing is that I can tell you that at the Pasteur, several people are keen of this new partnership. Actually, one is actually not sitting in the room, but being on the screen, because we have numerous Brazilian people at the Pasteur network, and they are very much looking forward to collaborating with their counterparts in Brazil, wherever it is. Actually, I have to say that about 20 years ago, I visited the FIO cruise. It was I had a great time in Rio, and this was one of a big journey I did when I was medical director at the Pasteur, the other one in Paris. I have to say, just because I don't want to be too long, we have better to do than hearing people like me. What I want to say is that I was also keen about the program, to follow up on what Etienne said. I think we have the three parts. The first one is going to be some kind of fundamental research on infectious disease, which is obviously a very important topic for the Pasteur in Lille and everywhere in the world. But then, as you know, one of the missions of the Pasteur is not only to do science for science, it's to do science for innovation, and that this innovation must serve our communities. And the second part is totally in that topic devoted into innovations. And the third part is on public health concerns. So I feel that this partnership has a lot of promising. And as Etienne said, I really look forward to seeing this partnership living, and to welcoming you all here in Lille. And I'm sure we'll see you, more of you, in the near future. So thank you for establishing this partnership, and I look forward to this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Xavier. It's time to give the floor to Professor Wilson Savino, who is the special advisor to the Fiocruz presidency for the cooperation with French institutions. He has been the director of the Osvaldo Cruz Institute from 2013 to 2017. He was also president of the Brazilian Societies of Immunology, Cellular Biology, and of the International Society of Neuroimmunomodulation. I know he did a lot for the French-Brazilian cooperation. Professor Savino, it's your turn to speak.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone in Brazil. Good afternoon, everyone in France. It's really a pleasure to be here in this meeting. And the first thing I'd like to say is this is a very beautiful initiative, and I congratulate you all that are working so hard so that this kind of initiative can become reality as soon as possible. And it's already reality, actually, because this is a kickoff meeting. As you said, I'm presently an attaché director linked to the presidency of Fiocruz, being mostly, not uniquely, but mostly involved in facilitate and foster as much as possible the cooperation between French institutions of science and technology and Fiocruz. Actually, I'm based more in France than in Brazil now, based in Paris, so that to really, let's say, push as much as possible different kinds of cooperation. And this, of course, will be one of the strategic ones. Another one belongs, another one is related to Institut Pasteur Paris, but also the Pasteur Network. By the way, I should say that there will be a competition between Institut Pasteur Senegal, Institut Pasteur Korea, and Fiocruz for hosting the next annual meeting of the Pasteur Network on 2024. So there will be a vote, and I hope we can get your vote from the Institut Pasteur Lille. The other thing I'd like to say is very personal and concerns the University of Lille, in which I have already had discussions in terms of neurobiology as well. But the personal issue is that my younger son actually had his master degree at the Sciences Po Lille more than 10 years ago. And so I have, in respect to the University of Lille, in addition to all the institutional engagement, there is a personal emotion to be dealing with this university where my youngest son had his MSc in Sciences Politiques. So my role as a special advisor for French cooperation is really to facilitate the things, different kinds of things, juridical things, scientific things. I have, by the way, an immunological background. Also being quite interested in neuroimmune interactions, of course. But idea is kind of phosphorylate as much as possible the interactions between French institutions, in this case, Pasteur Lille, which actually has a long-term cooperation of Fiocruz through Gilles Rivaud, who is engaged in testing in Senegal one vaccine developed and produced at Fiocruz against schistosomiasis. So again, I've been at the Pasteur Institute different times because of this, because I'm also an advisor by the presidents of Fiocruz to follow this project. So, last thing I'd like to say is that I'm here really to facilitate as much as possible the cooperation. And since I'll be in Paris from next week on, I can, if necessary, go to Lille to have, preambular discussions even before that the delegation of Fiocruz will formally visit the Lille institutions. So you can count on me completely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these words, these encouraging words. And now I leave the floor to Olivier Robineau, who will moderate the first topic, the session on infectious diseases.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. Just as a few words of introduction. So I'm an infectious disease specialist, associate professor at the University of Lille, and I spent 5 years ago 10 months in the Fiocruz in the modeling units. On what my aims was to model some epidemiological modeling on the HIV spread in MSM in Rio de Janeiro, and so I spent a few months there. So I'm very pleased to be in this keynotes and to moderate these keynotes about infectious diseases. As you will see in the program, there will be 3 speakers who will present to all their institution and their main goals in the research and the topic of infectious disease. So the first speaker is Manuel Barral Neto from Fiocruz Bahia, and I give the floor to him, and you have 15 minutes to talk. Thank you very much. 10 to 15. 10.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be in this meeting, and I really foresee, very strong collaboration in the future between the 3 institutions. And so we have promised, and I did a short presentation really on the situation on infectious diseases of mainly Fiocruz, but also Lille, because I put the address Lille to include Université and Pasteur. And then I'm taking an overview of the situation and the possibilities of collaboration could be. So if you can have the presentation, please. Okay. I have sent the presentation. Are you going to put it, or shall I do it?
You can share, Bahal. I think.
Because
previously.
Because we have sent the presentation, so I didn't really prepare it, but I will do it.
Okay.
I didn't.
But
I thought that the idea was to have that set from there.
So it's my fault because I asked them to to share.
Just a minute, it's not opening here.
I think you have now the right to share.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not. I cannot see here how I can share it. It doesn't appear for me. Share. Okay. Can you see it now? Did you see it?
Not yet. No, not yet.
Not yet. So maybe
Now?
now it's okay.
Okay.
Now it's fine.
So the idea, it's really, like I said, just to give an overview of the situation. So I've to clear first the production, scientific production in Brazil and France on the aspect of infectious diseases, not everything, but what we see in the left is Brazil. Medicine is a very important area here. And also I have highlighted some areas that could be related with infectious diseases like immunology, microbiology, biochemistry, and general molecular biology and pharmacology. And what we see that these are really, this is a number of publications, and this is citations. So they are really important areas in Brazil in terms of number and mainly in terms of citations. And a similar picture for medicine in France, as the numbers are different, but the situation of being a very large area with good impact. And also we see biochemistry, immunology, and pharmacology in similar positions. So in country terms, we have similar importance for this topic in the broad sense for the two countries. And now, if we take an analysis in the Web of Science of the situation of Fiocruz, we see that the major area is public, the environmental occupational health. It's very important. But then we have parasitology, tropical medicine, infectious diseases, microbiology. So although infectious diseases highlighted here, but in the broad sense, all the areas of tropical medicine and microbiology could also interact with that. So it's a very strong area in Fiocruz in terms of importance. And if you go to the address leave, of course, it's not a fair comparison in terms of this is Fiocruz that works only in health. And putting the address leave, we have everything. But even though we see microbiology and pharmacology with a lot of importance also. So the perspective, in putting a little bit more focus on that is still promising. So, and we see here individuals in Fiocruz that with a number of publications, larger numbers of publications, and we see that these are really people that work a lot on infectious diseases, like Beatriz Greenstein, that is from the National Institute of Infectious Diseases, Mauricio Barreto, that is an epidemiologist that works not only in infectious diseases, but a lot of infectious diseases, and Giovanetti and Bruno Andrade, that is mainly infectious disease. And another thing that it's not easy to see for people from outside is that there are people in this table from different units in Fiocruz in different parts of the country. So we have people from Rio, National Institute of Infectious Diseases, like Beatriz and Baudelaire, but we have Marcos Lacerda from Amazon, we have Bruno from Bahia, Mauricio from Bahia, and so Minas, so and have the both family that is really from Rio also. So it's of course a strong presence of this topic of infectious diseases in several Fiocruz units. So if you take the same idea of opportunity, of course, this is a kind of thing that we can work together afterwards to identify among these people with larger numbers of publications. Of course, in the Lille side, I cannot really identify the people, but you probably recognize some names in the table. So it's really that I think that if we really try to do a very strong collaboration between our institutions, we really have to stimulate strong groups, and strong groups is not only marked by larger numbers of papers. This is the easiest way to find very productive people, but we have other ways to evaluate and to explore. But if you can mobilize these leadership people that are producing a lot to do common efforts, the likelihood of a very productive and long-lasting collaboration is ensured. And then I come to Fiocruz and again to analyze the production on infectious diseases in the last 5 years. And what we see here that in terms of a number of publications and also citations, Fiocruz has in this period almost 600 publications with a citation that is 4,007 that cited them. So it's really an H index of 34. And we see here that in terms of numbers of publications, I don't know why it was so low here, but then, because of course we have included only the 5 years. So this is kind of blank here. So this is really a very stable number of publications. This is 2023, though it's on course. But we have in what draws the attention is really the very sharp increase in terms of the citation numbers of these papers. Of course, most of this period is influenced by the COVID pandemics with increased citations in all areas of infectious diseases. So not only in viral or COVID, but there was an explosion of, but mainly COVID was responsible for a lot of citations in this aspect. And so I'm getting to an end, that I highlighted the most cited publications in infectious diseases and addressing like organization Fiocruz and like I did before, and address Lille and not co-authorship. I mean, I had a hard time to find co-authored papers, but I'm sure they exist, but it was not easy to explore in the way I was doing that with just the address. But I mean, the idea was really to identify the subjects, and you see a lot of things in terms of use of prednisone in patients hospitalized with coronavirus, global and regional molecular epidemiology, a systemic review of global survey. So alternative strategies for mosquito-borne arbovirus control. What I'm trying to show here is that we have a very different areas that are highly cited in Fiocruz. I mean, clinical, entomological, epidemiological. So there are lots of possibilities of very productive people working on different areas or different approaches for infectious diseases. And similar to it's observed in Lille, the first case of coronavirus, of course, corona in this period of last 5 years is always the top citation. Clinical approaches, pathogenesis, evaluation, high incidence of some of the epidemiology. So what I see here is that we have a lot of possibilities of identifying very productive people in both sides that can really have common interests, even and not only in a single aspect of it, but in several areas like clinical epidemiology and more basic kind of approaches. And so I guess it's not easy because I could not find very well links already functioning, but it's promising. So we have lots of possibilities of really, I mean, making these efforts of joint collaboration a success. So let's work for, I mean, making it right. I mean, to make it the good way to stimulate the cooperation that I'm sure that exists, but it's not as strong as it could be. And thank you very much.
Hey. Thank you very much for this presentation, Manuel. And it's really highlights that if we only look at the snapshots, what you show is that the main publication, if we look at the name of the different people that you show in Brazil and in France we have more chronicle. More individuals that are focused on chronic disease, and in Brazil, more in Fiocruz, more on infectious disease, but also one which is chronic with Beatrice Grigian, which is HIV. And so I think it's one of the main topics, as you will see with the second presentation, say by Professor Eric Senville, that our main topic, he will show it better than me, he's my master, that our main subject is about chronic disease and chronic infectious disease, and so I think this is a main goal, as you will see, to work together. So please, Eric Senville, who is the head, who is the chair of the infectious disease department at the University of Lille, and he is the head of one of the two university departments of infectious disease in Lille, in Lille-Tourcoing. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Olivier, for your introduction. Good morning, good afternoon. So can you see my slides first? Is it okay?
Yes, no problem.
Thank you. So a few words on history of infectious disease in Lille University. It is a double-headed center, one in Lille, the other in Tourcoing. And when we look at the history, it started in Tourcoing. I'm sorry, it's a mistake on the slide. It's not 1990s, of course, but 1960s, with Professor André Fourier, followed by Professor Yves Mouton, and then Professor Yazdan Pana, who left for Paris in 2011. So we currently have two units, one of 20 beds in Lille, directed by Professor Karine Faure, and the other one, 42 beds in Tourcoing, directed by myself and Professor Olivier Olbino. So just a few slides to look at the patient profile we are facing when we are discussing and treating and managing patients with infectious disease. The first point is, as you can see on the slide, obesity. I'm started with obesity because, of course, obesity is related with many other comorbidities, especially diabetes mellitus, cardiopathy, joint degenerative lesions, renal diseases, cancers. And in terms of infectious disease, it means that we are facing with a lot of patients with diabetic-related infections, especially diabetic foot infections, infections endocarditis, prosthetic joint infections, vascular graft infections, and infections in immunosuppressed patients. So, of course, because of this situation, we also are, not only for obesity, but we also are the French champion for antibiotic consumption. And of course, it is related, as everybody knows, the antimicrobial resistance. So this is a profile, very simple, very superficial profile or survey of what we are facing in terms of infectious disease. So I start with clinical care because my background is clinical care. So our two units in Lille and Tourcoing are reference centers for, first, complex osteoarticular infections. And we are one of the 9 national centers for the management of these patients. And again, you can see that it is a double-headed unit managing this kind of potentially complex and severe infections. We are reference, especially in Tourcoing, for HIV disease and sexually transmitted infections, diabetic foot infection, especially foot osteomyelitis, because we have developed the expertise in bone and joint infections. Also vascular graft infections in collaboration between Lille and Tourcoing, and infections in non-HIV immunocompromised patients, especially in Lille, because of the recruitment they have in Lille city regarding cancer patients and patients with hematology cancers. It is not written on the slide, but of course, we are sharing the responsibility of the antibiotic stewardship, which is directed by Professor Karine Faure from Lille. So on this slide, I have focused on 6 research activities and separating Lille and Tourcoing to show you that we are not in competition, but we have complementary activities in this domain. For Lille, vaccination in specific populations, particularly pregnancy and immunocompromised patients, opportunistic infections in solid organ transplantation, infections during pregnancy, female genital infections, antibiotic resistance, new therapies, antibiotic therapies, but also new therapies, not only antibiotics. Pseudomonas aeruginosa infections from the experimental model to prevention of these infections, and non-HIV immunodeficiencies in adults. And in Tourcoing, you can see we have developed, and we are very active in the domain of vaccination, but specifically for patients with HIV, of course, because we are referring for HIV, but also for patients who will travel abroad or are candidate for expatriation, opportunistic infections in patients living with HIV, again, complex articular infections, sexually transmitted infections, diabetic foot infections, and vascular graft infections. So in more detail, when I look at the 5 main topics in research regarding in more detail, modelization, interaction, clinical trial, and pathophysiology, you can see that for tuberculosis, it is every aspect are covered. The same for HIV and sexually transmitted infections, non-HIV immunosuppression. It's not exactly the same for bone and joint infection and diabetic foot infections, especially modelization. It is to be determined at the moment, but we are working on this, on the other aspects. For vascular graft infection, we have to think to modelization and interaction, but we are working on clinical trials using new antibiotics, treatment modalities, especially trying to reduce the duration of treatment. And we are working with the biomaterial unit in Lille in this domain. And it's not really new, but probably his interest is new regarding post-infection disease, especially with the model of COVID-19, which is developed by Professor Robineau. So you can see that when we look at what we are doing in a term of research, it is more than clinical in epidemiology, in a large cohort of patients rather than a fundamental model, experimental models, in vitro models, with 2 exceptions. The work developed on Pseudomonas aeruginosa infection, especially with Professor Karine Faure and Dr. Emmanuel Faure. And for animal model, we have also a microbiologist working on an animal model with the question of how can we improve the outcome of chronic wounds, which is developed in collaboration with the Pasteur Institute in Lille. We have a lot of collaborations, especially the European Society Group of Implant-Associated Infections, because of our expertise in bone and joint, prosthetic joint infections. And you can see with a lot of different agencies for research, including Focus with Dr. Robineau. Grants, we have some grants, and if we sum the grants we obtained during the last 3 years, it is a little bit more than 4 million euros, especially from the National Agency for Research on HIV disease, the subgroup of emergent infectious disease, but also national grant for clinical research, regional grant for clinical research, and some private fundings, especially from firms. So I finish on our study projects, the main ones, starting with randomized controlled trials. We are promoter for 2. One is a multicentric randomized controlled trial comparing 2 antibiotics for the treatment of staphylococcal prosthetic joint infections. and Chronos 2, which is a trial comparing 2 durations of treatment for patients treated medically for diabetic foot osteomyelitis. And you can see that Lille and Tourcoing have developed a lot of prospective cohorts. I just put on the slides the main ones. So HIV for all northern France, a region, bone and joint infections, again, vascular graft infections, solid organ transplantation, especially from our colleagues from Lille, the same for invasive fungal or cytomegalovirus infections, the use of new antibiotics, and primary and secondary immunodeficiency in adults. So this is a very brief presentation, very clinical, I would say, presentation of what we are doing together, Lille and Tourcoing, in terms of infectious disease. So I finish with this beautiful picture from our city of Lille. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eric. Just to make it clearer, we have one university and 2 sites of clinical university departments, which is one in Lille and one in Tourcoing. And so we have different subjects of research, which are mainly from the bed to the bench, but we're also trying to make research from the bench to the bed. And so these kind of field of research are mainly done in the research department, which is CIIL, who the director is Jean Dubuisson, and who will talk now about his department. And I thank him very much to share his speak with us today. Thank you very much, Jean Dubuisson.
Good morning, Brazil, and good afternoon, France. So I will very briefly present you our Center for Infection Immunity. And if you want to have more details, you can go on our website, www.ciil.fr. So during the second half of the last century, people believed that infectious disease would belong to the past very rapidly due to development of antibiotics and vaccines. But in the past decades, we have seen resurgence of disease that we thought would be under control, like tuberculosis, schistosomiasis, or Bordetella pertussis. We have seen also, and everybody has seen the emergence of new infectious disease like COVID-19, which was the extreme example, but there are many other viruses like Zika virus that has affected Brazil also a few years ago. We have seen also the development of drug resistance in mainly antibiotics, but also in parasites like malaria. And with the modification of our environment, we see also more and more zoonotic diseases like flu, HIV, hepatitis E virus, I mean. We have seen also development of opportunistic infections like Pseudomonas aeruginosa or Cryptosporidium. And in the early 2000s, we have seen development of bioterrorism, and we work on Yersinia pestis as a potential agent of bioterrorism, and also suboptimal vaccine development. And we are also interested in non-communicable immunoinflammatory diseases, mainly of the lung, asthma, and COPD, and the interconnection between infectious diseases and these 2 pathologies. So the main objectives of the CIL are to increase our scientific knowledge on host pathogen interactions, mechanisms of pathogenesis, and the biology of the pathogens, and also to develop tools to fight infectious diseases like novel diagnostic tests, new drugs, and new vaccines. The different research topics at the CIL are as follows. In microbiology, we study bacteria-host interaction, but also development of new antibiotics and understanding antibiotic resistance, and also development of vaccines on different pathogens like M. tuberculosis, Bordetella pertussis, Yersinia pestis, Streptococcus pneumoniae, and so on. On the viruses, we study mainly virus-host interactions and antivirals on coronaviruses, hepatitis E virus, influenza virus, HIV, and noroviruses. And on parasites, we study host-parasite interaction and antiparasitic drugs on schistosoma, plasmodium, toxoplasma, cryptosporidium, and blastocystis. And as I mentioned, we study also chronic respiratory diseases like asthma and COPD. Our center is composed of 14 different teams. The team of, I'm not going to go to all the different teams, but several teams work on bacteria, like the team of Prissy Brodin, the team of Franck Lafont, Nathalie Mielkarek, and also the team of Jean-Claude Sirard, Florence Seban, and also Ruben Hartkorn. On viruses, it's my team working on coronaviruses, and also the team of François Trottin, mainly working now on coronaviruses also. In parasitology, there is the team of Jamal Khalif, and also the team of Oleg Melnik, Eric Viscogliosi, and also the team of Sylviane Pied. And the two teams working mainly on chronic respiratory disease are the team of Philippe Gosset and Anne Tsikopoulos. We have three new emerging teams since last year. The team of Alexandre Grassard on mechanobiology of host microbe interaction. The team of Fernando Real, who is also Brazilian, working on viral reservoirs in myeloid cells. And the team of Damien De Vos, who just started in April, studying evolutionary and environmental microbiology. Just would be difficult to explain all the details of all the projects we have been developing in our center. I will give you just a few examples of the main projects that have produced major discoveries in the field of infectious diseases. And the first example is the project developed by Camille Locht. He has been developing this project for several decades, working on a vaccine against Bordetella pertussis, called BPZE1, which is a live-attenuated vaccines in which the three major toxins of the bacteria have been inactivated, the pertussis toxin, the TCT toxin, and the dermonecrotic toxin, which makes this bacteria avirulent. And the objective of the vaccine is to inject intranasally these bacteria, and then they are competent for replication in the tissue, in the nasal tissues, leading to production of IgA antibodies and also cellular immune response, leading to rapid clearance of the infection and producing an almost rising immunity in a reinfection with the same bacteria. And this has been validated in a phase 2 clinical trial. And the next step will be potentially to see we can go further for commercialization. A second example is the project developed by Alain Bollard. Also, he has been developing this project for a very long time. He's working on Mycobacterium tuberculosis in collaboration with the chemist of the unit 1177, working on how to understand resistance to antimicrobial molecules. And it's well known for Mycobacterium tuberculosis that the major antibiotics are usually pro-antibiotics, meaning that they need to be bioactivated to find their target and inhibit their target. The problem is that there is a lot of resistance occurring in the bioactivation process, and that's what the group of Alain Bollard has been studying for a long time. And they have found, interestingly, alternative bioactivation pathway that are not sensitive to these resistant mutations. And this bioactivation pathway can be re-stimulated with new molecules that have been developed in collaboration with the chemists of the unit 1177, And one of these molecules, which is now a candidate in clinical trial called SMART 751, is in phase 2 clinical trial in South Africa to treat patients together with ethionamide to show, demonstrate the activity in these patients and show the validation of their model of activation of alternative bioactivation. A third example, and my last example, is an example concerning gut dysbiosis during influenza, which contributes to pulmonary pneumococcal superinfection through altered short-chain fatty acid production. It's known, and it was also redemonstrated by the group of François Trottin, that if you infect mice with influenza virus, then you alter the gut microbiota, and this due to decrease in food intake, and this alteration in microbiota leads to a decrease in production of short-chain fatty acid, and this leads to a decrease in the killing activity of alveolar macrophages. And if you do a superinfection with Streptococcus pneumoniae, you observe a proliferation of the bacteria, showing a lack of control of the superinfection. And what they have done, they have supplemented these mice with acetate treatment, stimulating free fatty acid receptor 2, specifically with acetic acid, and increasing the killing activity of alveolar macrophages and leading to the control of the superinfection by Streptococcus pneumoniae, clearly showing the crosstalk between the lung and the microbiota in these infections. And finally, we have also been very involved in the COVID task force during the COVID crisis. We have screened several chemical libraries of molecules used in medicine. We have identified a candidate medicine clofocol validated in preclinical model. And we have also contributed to the validation of other anti-SARS-CoV-2 compounds. And the group of François Trottin has also shown that the control of SARS-CoV-2 inflammation in aged hamster can be observed by removing senescent cells. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm open to any question.
Thank you very much. I see that there are now no question, but maybe there will be some question which will be sent to us by the chat. But I have one comment on the three presentations, saying that in Lille we can say that we have two way of thinking infectious disease research. We have a more clinical point of view with the two clinical departments, which are more and more involved in the other side, which is the unit of Jean Dubuisson. And the question is for Fiocruz. How do you interact with the clinicians in Fiocruz? When I was in Fiocruz, there were, of course, an hospital in the Fiocruz in Rio, but is there how do you interact with them? Are there some questions which are asked by the clinician to the fundamental research units? How do you manage this interaction between these two worlds which need to work together? Hello?
Maybe I can start, and other colleagues could complement. But yeah, there is the National Institute of Infectious Diseases that I've mentioned, where Beatriz, Greenstein, and Valdileia are really based on this hospital. But in Manaus, also, Marcos said that also appears in the list, is a clinician with strong clinical research on Manaus. He works in viral disease, but also malaria, and it's possible also. And I'm I mean, these are really, I guess, I mean, located in Fiocruz with strong clinical situations. But here in Bahia, there is also people that work with clinical research and field research in terms of parasitic diseases or infectious diseases in a broad sense. But mainly, Fiocruz is also make some led academic hospital network during the COVID crisis for multi-center studies in Brazil. So there are several possibilities of clinical research, even if it's not based only in Fiocruz hospitals, but related, and not only, besides hospital, also fieldwork in primary healthcare attention and kind of not only hospitalized patients, but also walk-in clinics and primary healthcare.
Okay, but are there some clinicians in your research unit which are more focused on fundamental topics, or the clinicians are more in the units, are only in the units based on epidemiological research or clinical trial research?
No, there are people that, I mean, like I said, both people in Rio and in Manaus and here in Bahia, they also explore mechanistic pathogenesis in several aspects, or the investigations on the agent in all these three sites that I'm not really restricting to the three. I'm just citing them because I know better, but Sabino is with his hand, they would complement.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, there is also another national institute at Fiocruz, which is the National Institute of Health for the mother, the child, and the adolescent, and which is within a hospital environment. So there is research and there is clinical practice. It's the pediatrician hospital, but for example, that played a major role in the Zika epidemics in Brazil. So we do have infectious diseases there as well. In addition to that, in the Oswaldo Cruz Institute, there is an outpatient service on leprosy, which is very big, very well constructed, doing at the same time basic research and clinical research as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't know if there are some questions from for the French part of the. I have one other question for Fiocruz. It's as you see in the presentation of Eric Senville, we are focused on the disease, the infectious disease that are consequences of chronic condition, and not only HIV, such as cardiovascular risk, and which are related to obesity, cardiovascular risk, and also chronic pulmonary conditions. Are these topics emerging in Fiocruz? I know you have more infectious disease, which are, you're in the tropical part of the world, so you have other problems and other pathogens which are highly prevalent. But are these topics emerging in your reflection of development of research, or are you more focused on the what we call emerging disease, and also tropical disease, tropical infectious disease, and HIV, of course?
How?
So, yeah.
Well, I know that there are people, I mean, here in Bahia, there's a colleague that is working on chronic or late COVID, long COVID manifestations. And, but it's the only thing that I, from the top of my head, I remember here in Bahia. So.
But how? HLV?
Oh, yeah, and sure. Yeah, sure, thanks. And there's a very strong group that works on HLV.
HLV,
and chronic manifestations, yes, sorry.
Also in Rio, there is another hospital that, by the way, I had forgotten, which is devoted to tuberculosis. which is linked to the National School of Public Health here at Fiocruz. So this hospital is really devoted to tuberculosis, and it is within the ecosystem of Fiocruz, working on tuberculosis. In terms of non-infectious diseases, it is much less than what is done in infectious diseases. But for example, there is a very interesting program going on at the National Institute of Health of the Mother, Child, and Adolescent, which is genetic errors related to the immune system. And so this is, it's a very nice program led by a researcher called Zilton Vasconcelos, and it is really related to innate disturbances, genetic linked innate disturbances related to the immune system.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other comments from the speakers? Any questions?
Yeah, if I may, hi, it's Nathalie here. I just want also to follow up on what Sabino said, that there was already an ongoing collaboration on vaccine development, or at least testing the vaccine developed at Fiocruz with some team here in Lille, but also with Senegal. And well, I'm also very keen on vaccine development, and I'm thinking that perhaps also some area of discussion which could be developed between the two teams. And I was wondering whether you're working or targeting specific disease to develop a vaccine, or or improve a vaccine which is already existing, and perhaps that's something we could discuss in the future.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to do that, and I do think, in addition to what you know by Dr. Miriam Tendler, there are a number of vaccine experiments being done at our production unit for vaccine production, diagnostic kit production, and biopharmaceuticals, which is the unity called Biomanguinhos. And I think we don't have a representative people here in this meeting, but for sure, including, I should say that Fiocruz has been chosen by WHO to be a hub for South America, for Latin America actually, for development of vaccines based on mRNA. So I think it is a key point that could be further discussed in a much more detailed way. And I think for that, people from Biomanguinhos should be involved in this such a discussion.
Okay, so let's keep in touch about that, because I would be very keen on further, discussing this point.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Vinicius Sotiris perhaps could be the person to be, to be chosen for this kind of discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just forgot to say that in addition to all what we have said about infectious diseases, Fiocruz has building a program on cancer, and of course, HTLV is already connected to cancer, but in addition to that, non-infectious cancer, and these have two arms. This is in the beginning, but there is one arm which is production of medicines for that, and this is in the there is another production unit called Pharmanguinhos that produce synthetic medicines as well, and there is a portfolio for that for cancer. Fiocruz will be producing anti-PD-1 as monoclonal antibody for cancer as well. Fiocruz is already producing by Biomanguinhos different kinds of monoclonal antibodies for clinical use. And there is also a research program on cancer, which is, I would say, rather in the beginning, but which is completely linked to the National Cancer Institute, Brazilian National Cancer Institute, which is also in Rio and also belongs to the Ministry of Health. And quite recently, a number of initiatives with the National Cancer Institute are being settled, including the development of CAR T-cell strategy for hematological cancer.
Okay, thank you very much. Our main topic was infectious diseases, but there's one comment in the chat saying that there's also some teams who are working on, of course, as you mentioned, on other things. If you cause, it's not an infectious disease, but there are also teams based on aging, and aging is also a main topic in the University of Lille. And so, so now I think we are right in time to leave the floor to the second topic, named Inequalities in Health and Health Systems. And thank you very much for your presentation, and hopefully see you soon to develop a common research program.
Thank you, Olivier. So we go to the second topic, inequalities in health. And the moderator is Eduardo Melo. I think he will speak in Portuguese, and then there will be a translation to English. Eduardo.
Sim, bom dia a todos e a todas. Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good morning, one and all.
Nós vamos iniciar então o eixo 2, desigualdades em saúde e sistemas de saúde. Nesse eixo nós teremos uma apresentação da Fiocruz, né, particularmente da Escola Nacional de Saúde Pública, e duas apresentações do lado francês, precedidas de uma breve introdução feita pelo Thomas Mongeron. Então, inicialmente nós vamos começar com a apresentação de Luciana Dias. Luciana Dias é pesquisadora e vice-diretora de pesquisa e inovação da Escola Nacional de Saúde Pública Sérgio Aroca, da Fiocruz. Eu passo então a palavra para a Luciana poder iniciar a sua apresentação.
So we'll begin this line number 2 of the discussion, which involves inequalities in health and health systems. We'll have one presentation by Fiocruz and 2 from France. The presentation here from Fiocruz will be by Luciana Diaz Lima, who is a senior researcher and vice director of research and innovation at the National School of Public Health at Fiocruz in Brazil.
Bonjour, bom dia para os meus colegas do Brasil, boa tarde para os meus colegas da França. Eu aqui farei uma apresentação bem abrangente e panorâmica das atividades de pesquisa desenvolvidas pela Escola Nacional de Saúde Pública Sérgio Aroca, da Fiocruz, visando explorar possíveis parcerias entre nossas instituições.
Good morning to my Brazilian colleagues. Good afternoon to my French colleagues. I will be discussing here inequalities in health and health systems and possibilities. I'll give a comprehensive overview of this area and the research that's being conducted, and with a view towards possible partnerships between our institutions.
Inicialmente, eu gostaria de traçar breve panorama da situação do Brasil e como as desigualdades sociais e de saúde se expressam em nossa realidade.
I will give an overview now about the way that social and health inequalities are expressed in the Brazilian reality.
O Brasil é país de dimensões continentais, populoso, diverso e extremamente desigual. É uma república federativa presidencialista.
Brazil is a continental-sized country with a huge population that is highly diverse, and the country is very unequal. The government system, it's a federal republic with a presidential system.
Temos uma população de 203 milhões de habitantes, segundo os dados do último censo realizado no Brasil, em 2022, distribuída num território de cerca de 8.500 quilômetros quadrados.
The population of Brazil is 203 million, according to the most recent census estimate from 2022. It's the 7th largest country in the world and spread across a territory of 8,500 square kilometers.
A nossa federação é conformada por 26 estados, um distrito federal e 5.568 municípios, sendo que 80% desses municípios possuem população até 50.000 habitantes.
Brazil has 26 states and the federal district where the national capital is located, Brasilia. There are 5,568 municipalities or counties, 88% of which have fewer than 50,000 inhabitants each.
É um arranjo que traz uma complexidade enorme para a organização do nosso sistema público de saúde, o SUS, dado que os 3 entes governamentais são corresponsáveis pela gestão e pelo financiamento da saúde, sendo que os nossos municípios e estados são profundamente desiguais entre si.
This situation entails huge complexity for the unified health system called SUS, because it's organized in 3 different tiers, the federal, state, and municipal levels. While between the municipalities and the states, there is huge heterogeneity and inequality between the various different states and municipalities.
No ranking que faz a distribuição dos países pela riqueza, pelo PIB, o Brasil se encontra entre as 9 nações mais ricas do mundo, né, mas tem uma diversidade bastante significativa do ponto de vista étnico-racial. Nós temos 43% da nossa população se declara não branca, temos 305 grupos étnicos indígenas, que com mais de 270 línguas.
Brazil has the 9th largest GDP, the 9th largest world economy in the world. It is a highly diverse country in terms of race and ethnicity, with 43% of the population self-declared as non-white, and there are 305 indigenous ethnic groups, including more than 270 languages.
Apesar de estarmos na lista entre os países mais ricos do mundo, a nossa taxa de desemprego tem crescido nos últimos anos, sendo que no primeiro trimestre, as últimas informações que temos é que 8,8% da nossa população é desempregada.
Despite the fact that we have the 9th largest economy in the world, it's economically very unequal. And with unemployment rising, according to the first quarter of 2023, it was 8.8% of the population were unemployed.
O Brasil expressa as desigualdades sociais, né, e de saúde de diferentes maneiras. Aqui eu trago informações, né, do Laboratório de Desigualdades Mundiais, vinculado à Escola de Economia de Paris, né, que publicou seu relatório em 2021, seu último relatório, e que aponta que os 10% mais ricos do Brasil, né, detêm cerca de 59%, né, de toda a renda nacional, e 1% mais rico da nossa população representa metade da população mais pobre da nossa população, apenas 1% da riqueza nacional.
There are different ways that the inequalities are expressed in Brazil. One of them, according to the World Inequality Lab, and this was in a report published by the School of Economics in Paris in 2021, according to this report, the wealthiest 10% earn nearly 59% of the total GDP, and the poorest half of the Brazilian population own less than 1% of the country's wealth.
Aqui eu trouxe algumas informações selecionadas, alguns indicadores sociais e de saúde, né, do Brasil. Argentina, Chile, Colômbia e México, que são países que têm sido objeto de estudos desenvolvidos por grupo de pesquisa da ENSP.
These are indicators from 4 selected countries, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico, which have been the object of studies conducted at the Brazilian National School of Public Health. So this is a comparative study.
Esse é um estudo que tem privilegiado a questão, né, tem tido como foco principal a situação das desigualdades sociais e de saúde, né, nesses países, né, adotando uma abordagem comparada entre eles.
This is a comparative approach amongst these 4 different countries, focusing on social and health inequalities.
Eu só vou destacar nesse quadro aqui alguns indicadores que mostram uma situação do nosso país, né, pior do que a maioria ou a totalidade dos países representados aqui no quadro, né, em termos de expectativa de vida ao nascer, mortalidade infantil e mortalidade materna. O Brasil vem apresentando indicadores, né, extremamente alarmantes, né, que expressam as desigualdades das condições de vida e saúde da nossa população.
I've highlighted here in red 3 of these indicators: life expectancy, infant mortality, and maternal mortality, where Brazil, comparatively speaking, is performing worse than the other 3 countries in this, the other 4 countries rather, in this comparison.
Em termos de indicadores que expressam também desigualdades que se apresentam no nosso sistema de saúde, eu aqui gostaria de destacar 3, né? Aqui o gasto total em saúde, que no Brasil hoje, o dado mais recente aponta que o gasto total em saúde representa 10,3% do PIB nacional, mas que somente 4,6% desse gasto, né, gasto público em saúde.
Again, here I'm highlighting one of the expressions of inequality, health inequality in Brazil, is health spending as a percentage of the GDP, where Brazil spends 10.3% of its GDP on health. However, only 4.6% of the GDP is public spending on health.
O que explica essa situação são subsídios, né, e uma cobertura significativa da população, né, razoável, significativa da população, né, de planos e seguros de saúde, que representam a maior parte do gasto privado em saúde no Brasil.
What explains this is there's a reasonable coverage for health care. Most of the private spending, however, on healthcare is represented by health insurance and private health plans.
E um último indicador que eu gostaria de destacar, que mostra também, né, sinais alarmantes, né, que tem sido objeto de preocupação dos nossos pesquisadores, que tem a ver com a queda da cobertura vacinal em nosso país, que em 2021 apontava para uma queda expressiva, né, 67% da nossa população tinha o calendário completo da vacinação, né, em 2021.
Another alarming figure here is the fact that the vaccination coverage has decreased in Brazil. In 2021, for example, only 67% of the population had they had their vaccination calendar completely covered.
Bem, quem somos na Escola Nacional de Saúde, como a Escola Nacional de Saúde lida com esses desafios que se apresentam na nossa realidade? A Escola Nacional de Saúde Pública, a Ciajarouca, é uma instituição de ciência e tecnologia vinculada à Fiocruz, que em 2024 completa 70 anos.
How does the National School of Health deal with these challenges? Well, the National School of Public Health is a science and technology institution and school that's affiliated with the Fiocruz, the Sérgio Aroca National School of Public Health. In 2024, it will be celebrating its 70th anniversary.
Temos como missão formar profissionais, gerar e compartilhar conhecimento e práticas para promover né, os direitos à saúde e melhorar as condições de vida da nossa população. Por isso, o compromisso com a redução das desigualdades e garantia do direito à saúde é algo que marca as atividades desenvolvidas pela INSP.
Our mission is to train professionals, generate and share knowledge and practices to promote the right to health and improve the population's living conditions, all of which are a central part of our mission.
Nossas atividades, né, estão relacionadas à produção e comunicação e divulgação do conhecimento científico, envolve também programas de pós-graduação, né, na área da saúde pública, saúde coletiva, cooperação técnica, vigilância e atenção à saúde.
Our activities involve the production and dissemination, publication of scientific research, graduate level education, master's and PhDs, technical cooperation, and activities in surveillance and patient or healthcare.
A INSP possui 244 servidores, né, pesquisadores, né, que estão distribuídos nas 12 subunidades, né, que compõem a nossa instituição. São 9 departamentos e 3 centros, né, que envolvem um centro de saúde, de atenção primária à saúde, um centro de pesquisa e atenção à saúde relacionada aos trabalhadores, à saúde do trabalhador, e também, né, um centro de pesquisa e atenção especializada em saúde na área de tuberculose.
Okay, our researchers, the total number is 244. They're distributed across 12 different subunits, 9 departments, and 3 centers. One of the 3 centers is an academic health center in primary care. Another is a research and healthcare center specialized in workers' health. And the third of these 3 centers is a department dedicated to care for tuberculosis. And 71% of the researchers participate in research groups.
Nossos pesquisadores, então, se distribuem por essas 12 subunidades, sendo que 71% desses pesquisadores, né, participam de grupos de pesquisa, sendo que 65 grupos, a INSP possui 65 grupos de pesquisa.
Again, the researchers are distributed across these 12 units. Again, 71% of the researchers participate in research groups, and there are 65 of these groups in the National School of Public Health.
Nossos pesquisadores são bastante qualificados, 89% possuem doutorado, em média concluíram esse doutorado há 14 anos, né, e 10% têm curso de mestrado, sendo que 31% possui algum estágio de pós-doutoramento.
The researchers are highly qualified. 89% have completed a PhD, on average 14 years previously. 10% have master's degree, and 31% of the researchers have some form of postdoctoral internship or fellowship.
Na Escola Nacional de Saúde Pública, nós temos 6 programas de pós-graduação que eu vou apresentar na sequência. As nossas linhas de pesquisa estão fortemente relacionadas a esses programas de pós-graduação. Cerca de 52% dos nossos pesquisadores são professores desses 6 programas de pós-graduação.
52% of the researchers are faculty members in the 6 different graduate courses at the National School of Public Health, and the fields are listed on the right.
Nós temos uma diversidade muito significativa, né, de profissionais, graduação diversa na escola, né, então mais de 40, né, cursos de graduação, né, os nossos pesquisadores, né, estão relacionados a mais de 40, né, cursos de graduação diferentes, e também atuam em áreas diversas, né, com especialidades diversas na área de saúde pública.
The research teams, or the faculty and research teams, are highly multidisciplinary and diverse. They've had their undergraduate training in more than 40 different areas. The main ones are listed here in the graph on the right. Others, pharmacy, nursing, social sciences, engineering, psychology, biological sciences, and medicine.
Então, a característica multidisciplinar, né, algo que se expressa também nas atividades de pesquisa direcionadas para a área da saúde pública na INSP.
So the multidisciplinary nature of these researchers are expressed in the activities that are conducted at the National School of Public Health.
Eu aqui vou apresentar as grandes áreas temáticas, né, relacionadas às pesquisas desenvolvidas na ENSP, que têm, né, também interfaces significativas com as questões que envolvem as desigualdades sociais de saúde e do sistema de saúde.
The main research, the thematic areas in the research correlate directly to the inequalities in health and the health system.
E são 9 grandes áreas temáticas, uma relacionadas às desigualdades, grupos populacionais vulnerabilizados, direitos, equidade e saúde, onde grupos diversos são privilegiados nos estudos, como populações, povos indígenas, populações em situação situação de rua, a população negra, pretos, pardos, né, e outros grupos vulnerabilizados são privilegiados nesses estudos.
One of the thematic areas, inequalities and vulnerable populations and rights to health. These groups include indigenous peoples, the situation of homeless people, the Black and brown population, and other vulnerable groups.
Temos também outras áreas temáticas relacionadas ao ambiente, trabalho, vigilância e saúde, né, mudanças do mundo do trabalho e saúde, trabalhadores e saúde, análise e avaliação de políticas, programas, tecnologias, sistemas, serviços e atenção à saúde, ética, integridade em pesquisa e saúde pública, mudanças, né, no mundo atual, né, mudanças, transformações contemporâneas, impacto nos sistemas de saúde, políticas públicas, desenvolvimento, tecnologias aplicadas à saúde pública, emergências sanitárias e desastres, e também problemas, desafios, dilemas que atingem o nosso sistema público de saúde, o SUS, né, ao longo do tempo, né, e desafios também atuais.
The other thematic areas involve workers and health, workers' health, analysis and evaluation of policies, programs, technologies, systems, services, and healthcare, ethical issues and integrity in research and public health, global challenges, contemporary changes in health and health systems and their impacts on health, public policies, development and technologies applied to public health, health emergencies and disasters, and the old and emerging challenges for our unified health system called the SUS.
Nós temos 6 programas de pós-graduação, né, na escola, como eu havia ressaltado. São 6 programas que se constituíram, né, ao longo do tempo, em diferentes momentos, e possuem formas de organização, né, do ponto de vista da gestão, né, e áreas de atuação desse programa, e também em linhas, né, que expressam as atividades de pesquisa e também, de certa forma, as trajetórias de formação desses alunos.
We have 6 different graduate programs. Their own management formats. They have different lines of research, and the research expresses the faculty and student body participating in these graduate programs.
O programa de pós-graduação em saúde pública é o mais antigo da escola, ele foi criado em 1977, ele possui mais de 100, né, docentes, sendo que são 64 docentes permanentes, né, que atuam, né, de uma forma mais permanente no âmbito desses programas, né, e envolve 3 áreas, grandes áreas de concentração, né, determinação do processo saúde e doença, né, produção, trabalho, território e direitos humanos, política, planejamento, gestão e cuidado à saúde, sociedade, violência e saúde.
The oldest of these 6 programs is the graduate program in public health, It was created in 1977. There are over 100 faculty members, 64 of whom are permanent faculty members, and has three major concentration areas, which are the determination of health disease processes, production, work, territory, and human rights, policy planning, management, and healthcare, and society, violence, and health.
Esse programa envolve mais de 18 linhas de pesquisa.
This graduate program in public health has 18 different research lines.
O segundo programa mais antigo que temos na escola é o Programa de Saúde Pública e Ambiente. Ele foi criado em 2006, ele possui 25 docentes permanentes, né, e se constitui em 3 grandes áreas de concentração: epidemiologia ambiental, gestão e saneamento ambiental e toxicologia ambiental.
The second oldest graduate studies program was created in 2006. It's called the Public Health and the Environment, and it has 25 permanent faculty members. The three major concentration areas are environmental epidemiology, environmental management and sanitation, and environmental toxicology.
Esse programa inclui 6 linhas de pesquisa.
This program has 6 research lines that are listed on the screen.
Terceiro programa mais antigo que temos na escola é o Programa de Epidemiologia e Saúde Pública. Ele foi criado em 2008, ele possui 34 docentes permanentes e tem uma única área de concentração, que é o de Epidemiologia em Saúde Pública. São 8 linhas de pesquisa, né, que são incluídas aí, constituem, né, também áreas de pesquisa e trajetórias de formação desses alunos.
The third oldest program is Epidemiology and Public Health, created in 2008 with 34 permanent faculty members. It has a single concentration area called Epidemiology and Public Health. And there are 8 different research lines which express the research paths of these lines of research for the faculty and students.
Temos também o programa de bioética e ética aplicada e saúde coletiva. É um programa de pós-graduação em associação que envolve mais 2 instituições de pesquisa e formação, né, 2 universidades, né, no caso, no estado do Rio de Janeiro, a Universidade do Estado do Rio de Janeiro e a Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro. Ele possui 10 docentes permanentes e também se organiza em uma única área de concentração, bioética, ética aplicada e saúde pública, e possui 2 linhas de pesquisa.
The graduate program in Bioethics, Applied Ethics, and Collective Health was created in 2010. It's conducted in collaboration with 2 other universities here in Rio de Janeiro, which is the State University of Rio de Janeiro and the Federal University in Rio de Janeiro. There are 10 permanent faculty members. The concentration area is bioethics and applied ethics and public health, with 2 research lines listed on the screen.
Os 2 últimos programas, né, são programas de natureza profissional, fortemente aplicados, né, aos serviços de saúde e ao Sistema Único de Saúde. O programa de mestrado profissional em saúde pública, que foi criado em 2002, possui 52 docentes permanentes e se organiza em 2 grandes áreas de concentração: políticas públicas, gestão, né, e avaliação em saúde, e o programa e a área de concentração de vigilância e atenção à saúde. Esse programa possui 14 linhas de pesquisa.
The last 2 graduate programs are executive master's programs that are heavily focused on training personnel for the unified health system. The master's program in executive master's program in public health was created in 2002. It has 52 permanent faculty members. The concentration areas are public policies, management and healthcare, and health surveillance and assessment. And it has 14 different research lines. This is on the screen.
E o último programa que temos, o programa de epidemiologia em saúde pública de mestrado, nível de mestrado profissional, também fortemente aplicado, né, aos serviços de saúde, ao SUS, foi criado em 2010, ele possui 17 docentes permanentes, uma única área de concentração de epidemiologia aplicada nos serviços de saúde, com 8 linhas de pesquisa.
Similar to the previous program, the Executive Master's Program in Epidemiology and Public Health was created in 2010. It has 17 permanent faculty members. The concentration area is epidemiology applied to health services. There are 8 different research lines, and this program, like the previous one, is heavily focused on training personnel to serve the unified national health system.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you for your attention.
Obrigado, Luciana. Nós demoramos um pouco mais de tempo nessa apresentação em virtude da pausa necessária para a tradução, mas na sequência a gente já vai então iniciar com as apresentações dos colegas da França. Eu passo então inicialmente para a palavra do Thomas Morgenroux.
Took us a little bit longer than we expected because of the pauses for the consecutive interpretation, but now I'll turn the floor over directly to Thomas Morgenroux.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, Eduardo. So, who present the...
I will share.
We share. Yes, thank you. So, my colleague and me present University of Lille. I will introduce Jean-Baptiste Boscard and Philippe Sabot, who talk after me in a few seconds. Myself, I content myself with a brief introduction to present you the context of the research in the human sciences in health at the University of Lille, before giving the voice to my 2 colleagues who will present a successful example of interdisciplinary research. So the Université of Lille is not a specialized institute such as you. It's a general university that covers all the disciplinary fields that may be of interest to the human sciences and health. Each disciplinary field has 1 or more research teams, and some of them integrate health and inequalities in their research. I could give you several examples of publication of subjects that illustrate the diversity of approach, but it's not the main topic today. We would prefer take the time to present to you what we want to do. Our goal is to promote a multidisciplinary approach to respond to society needs. In France, such as Brazil, we have to deal with health access inequalities, maybe for different reasons, but it's a main topic. We have a second topic is to sustain our health system at an economic level, but also for difficulties in human resources. For this, the University of Lille has created various research groups in connection with civil society. I can mention in particular the creation of a hub, which name Culture Society Changing Practices, which is directed by my colleague, Professor Sabot, here present, who will be able to tell you about it quickly. But also the creation of thematic chairs, in particular chairs linked to the United Sustainable Development Objectives, such as the chair which I have the scientific responsibility, that name Health, Vulnerability and Territory in Hauts-de-France. France is near the country yard in Lille. So in this context, we want to present you an example of what we can do in our interdisciplinary scientific collaboration with international partnerships. This is why I immediately give the word to my colleagues holding the chair, which name Vulnérage. Vulnérage en français. So maybe Philippe? Philippe?
Il faut me brancher ton micro.
Ouais.
Okay, it's better. Hello everyone, I am Philippe Sabot, and I'm just going to add a few points of context to what has just been said. I'm currently the coordinator of one of the hubs of the Initiative d'Excellence at the University of Lille, and this hub is called Changing Cultures, Societies, Practices, or Societies, it's shorter. And this hub is organized around three major challenges, which you can see on this slide. And one of these challenges is specifically dedicated to processes of vulnerability and the study of their impacts at individual and social levels. And these impacts are expressed in terms of exclusion or inequality. That means inequality in exposure to various risks like health, socioeconomic, and political risks. And the question is then to know what dynamics of inclusion and possibly care can be mobilized to respond to these processes of vulnerability and the situation that they create. And it is within this framework that a wide range of interdisciplinary projects, next slide please, have been developed within the hub societies. These projects have developed in the particular context of the Région Hauts-de-France, which is a post-industrial context conducive to multiple forms of vulnerability at the local population level. On this slide, I have only mentioned three projects that had an orientation towards health issues, particularly in connection with the recent sanitary crisis. First, a project on the impact of this crisis on conditions of detention and prisoners, a project on the reconfiguration of solidarities on a local scale, and a project dealing with the question of the epistemology of psychiatry. In addition to these research projects, there are two more specific ones linked to the joint issues of care and aging. And Jean-Baptiste Boscard will now provide more details on these two projects, the Cher Vulnérage and the international network coverage. Ton micro, Jean-Baptiste.
Excuse-moi, pour pas faire de bras. Excuse me. So Vulnérage chair is a typical example of what is possible in Lille to produce a multidisciplinary, multi-professional and participative research group that here focuses on the issues of vulnerability and frailty among other people. In this group, we have researchers from philosophy, ethics of care, sociology, psychology, geriatrics, and biology of aging. And we propose in-depth multidisciplinary reflection on the normative, psychological, and social ethical issues surrounding aging with a number of joint projects. So we do not have too much time, and it was just an example, but typically we perform here an evaluation of integrated care project for all the people, the French PERPA project, with several different qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods in research to evaluate procedures, participation of healthcare professional efficacy. Due to time constraint, I don't have so much time, but just to explain that for policy makers, we explain that if you want to produce an integrated care project for vulnerable people to improve access to care for those vulnerable people, you cannot reach all physicians. Some of them will agree with the project, will be aware of geriatrics, find time savings in such projects, benefits, and at the opposite, other will find that it's wasted time, it's a control of the activity, it's an intrusion into the holy doctor-patient relationship, and that this can be predicted according to activity reports, data claims. And so it can be very important for policymakers for future integrated care projects. That's just a small example, but typically what we can do together. And thanks to the support of the Lille University, Fondation Université, and also all the local ecosystem for research and support for French national research programs, we could build the coverage group, which is an international group that goes deeper and further into the reflection with 6 European countries and Canada, with experts in even more fields, with more disciplines that are involved in this international group. And here it's just to explain that it has been built here at the end of 2020, and we've been active. The goal is not to explain everything, but once again, that in Lille we have a great support for from international research, international departments. We can have several international meetings, a lot of productions, answers to calls, and we can produce a really greater quality of research at the European level. And just an example here, we are able to produce or to clarify major concepts that are daily used and for which are a lot of discussion, typically in geriatrics. I give the point of view, what I understand as a physician. I'm not an expert in ethics of care, but typically here, we explain the concept of vulnerability related to frailty. That is very important for geriatricians because there are a lot of discussion around frailty, what it is, and nobody agrees, and it discuss. And what we explain, thanks to work with colleagues, that is you have the fundamental vulnerability that is here, the big circle. When you're alive, human being, then you are exposed to injury and to death. So being alive is being mortal. Okay, that is basics. That doesn't help so much the physician, but that's interesting. And then the colleagues really clearly explain that you have individual characteristics, typically multimorbidity, polypharmacy, dementia, depression, malnutrition, so on, that increase your individual risk of being injured. That is frailty, but that's only individual. And if you are frail, you have new needs. And the most important is you have a vulnerable, relational vulnerability with your environment. If your environment answers these needs, that's okay, you're fine, you are not vulnerable or not so much. If your environment does not answer your needs, then you are vulnerable. And that's of major importance for all geriatricians, and providing such concepts really clarify the way we have to build research interventions and to sync our discipline. So that's typically what we perform locally. So that was point of view of the physician, and I let Philippe probably better or deeper explain such concept. Philippe?
Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. So in the few minutes remaining for this presentation, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the research topics and issues at the heart of shared vulnerage and coverage network. And these topics revolve around the relationship between vulnerability and care, and they have led recently to the collective writing of 2 commentaries. The first commentary was published in Age and Aging, and it highlighted the link between frailty as an identified geriatric notion, as Jean-Baptiste said, and vulnerability as a notion crossing the field of humanities, ethics, and social sciences. And the aim of this short text was to promote an approach to vulnerability that takes into account the qualitative dimension of frailty, that is the experience that older people have of frailty, an approach that gives access to the relational nature of this form of vulnerability, and that provides a better understanding of how vulnerability of the older people call for special attention and for care as an appropriate and demanding response to situations of frailty. So next slide, please. Okay. This link between vulnerability and care is developed in the second commentary. In the previous commentary, the focus was on moving from frailty to vulnerability and from vulnerability to care. And in this one, in the second commentary, we start from care and even the ethics of care to show how care practices or care work define an experience shared by vulnerable people and by those who provide this care, professional or informal caregivers. So I just want to pick up on a few salient points from this collective reflection. The first point concerns the importance of developing a qualitative approach to the care experience of vulnerable older people. So it differs from the type of approach envisaged by the Beryl Institute. The patient experience assessment indeed focuses on a patient immersed in a care institution, and it is based on a standardized questionnaire. But this standardization misses something essential in the experience of care. That is its relational dimension. And this relational dimension is played out at several levels. And first, at the intersubjective level. Care is a relationship between subjects whose interaction modifies the nature and the quality of care. And this intersubjectivity is well highlighted in the ethics of care, and in particular by Tronto. Tronto defined 4 phases of care as ways of establishing and deepening the relationship between a caregiver and a care receiver. Each of these phases is based on relational and ethical skills, attentiveness, responsibility, competence, and responsiveness. But we propose to go further than this dual schema of the care experience with a dyad caregiver and patient by bringing in another relational level. This is a level that involves the stakeholders in a social and cultural context. For example, the cultural models of the family and the specific roles of men and women in family. Moreover, this relationship with a specific social-cultural environment plays a particularly important role in understanding the situation of informal carers. And this situation is embedded in 2 additional dimensions. The first dimension is that of the materiality of the care to be provided. And another dimension is the emotional burden of the caregiving relationship. This relationship is not a neutral, distant relationship, but one that is close and marked by a lot of feelings. This dimension also have to cope with the constraints of the personal, familial, and social environment and culture of all the people involved in the care process. So the experience of care is part of a multi-dimensional context at the interface of subjective representations, institutional organization of care, and finally, the global orientations of public health policies. And finally, and on this basis, we suggest renewing the traditional therapeutic alliance, which is based on caregiver-patient dyad and which is oriented toward the cure. And we propose the notion of a care alliance. This care alliance takes into account what each stakeholder involved in the multimodal and multi-relational experience of care needs to learn from the other in order to improve the effectiveness and above all, the quality of that care. So that is the presentation of these commentaries and this collective reflection. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Thomas Mongeron, Jean-Baptiste Boscay e Philippe Sabot. Eu gostaria de fazer um breve comentário e uma questão para a minha colega Luciana e também para os colegas franceses.
I'd like to ask a brief question for the two French colleagues and also for my colleague, for Luciana here from Brazil.
A apresentação da Luciana traz um panorama abrangente sobre essa relação entre desigualdades, sistemas de saúde, sobre várias possibilidades de abordá-las.
Luciana's approach has given us a broad overview of the situation of inequality in health and health system and the way to address them.
A apresentação dos colegas da Universidade de Lille, por sua vez, nos traz uma espécie de exemplificação, de materialização do estudo sobre vulnerabilidade aplicado especificamente a um determinado ciclo de vida.
The two examples from our colleagues from Lille have given us material examples of the situation of vulnerability, and specifically as applied to one phase in the life cycle.
Considerando que vulnerabilidade e desigualdade são conceitos que possuem uma grande zona de convergência, um grande campo comum, mas que também possuem singularidades, né? Vulnerabilidades não é exatamente a mesma coisa que desigualdade, desigualdade também não é a mesma coisa, mas ambos são muito próximos. Considerando isso, eu faria a pergunta para vocês, gostaria de fazer uma pergunta. Posso prosseguir com a tradução, ou você já quer traduzir?
The concepts of vulnerability and inequality, and they're two concepts that converge in many senses, but they also have their specificities. They're not exactly the same thing. So based on the similarity and the difference, I would like to address a question to the three speakers.
A pergunta seria no sentido de expandir esse diálogo inicial que estamos fazendo aqui, se vocês poderiam nos indicar, tanto no caso brasileiro como no caso francês, quais são, na saúde, as questões relacionadas à desigualdade e às vulnerabilidades mais emergentes nesse momento.
I would like for the three of you, if possible, to expand on this dialogue here, stating both in the case of Brazil and in France, what are the main emerging topics in terms of inequality and vulnerability in health, both in France and in Brazil?
Posso começar?
Luciana, sim.
Não, então, eu acho, assim, Eduardo, que temos possibilidade de explorar, né, trabalhos conjuntos, né, considerando essa questão, a dimensão que envolve as vulnerabilidades e condicionantes, né, processos que determinam essas vulnerabilidades de duas formas principais.
I think that we can explore jointly these issues of the conditioning factors or the determinants of vulnerability in the two realities.
Uma primeira possibilidade é, de fato, fazer trabalhos conjuntos direcionados para grupos populacionais específicos.
A first possibility would be to do joint work addressing specific population groups.
Isso porque uma série de expressões das desigualdades sociais e de saúde, né, muitas vezes expressam justamente as situações de saúde mais precárias, né, condições mais adversas relacionadas a esses grupos específicos.
This is because the expressions of social and health inequalities relate specifically to the precarious health situation and the adverse health situation of these specific populations.
Por exemplo, no caso do Brasil, a situação, por exemplo, que explica, né, a maior mortalidade de Covid na região norte, uma parte tem a ver com, né, a situação da Covid nas populações indígenas, né, que se concentram fortemente na região norte.
One example in Brazil would, for example, would be the higher mortality due to COVID-19 in the northern region of Brazil. One of the major factors in this involves the fact that the north of Brazil concentrates the largest proportion of the indigenous population in Brazil.
Então, estudos direcionados para esses grupos populacionais, né, numa agenda convergente, né, de ambas instituições, pode ser interessante. Eu destacaria aqui, né, os grupos, né, populações indígenas, mas não só. Hoje nós temos na ENSP grupos se dedicando, né, às condições de saúde e aos condicionantes das desigualdades que se expressam também relacionadas aos grupos migrantes, população migrante em nosso país, que também é um número expressivo, né, e também a população negra, né, que também vários pesquisadores, né, da ESP também estão direcionados para esses estudos, para esses grupos.
I cited the fact that we could have convergent agendas on pertaining to these population groups, and I cited the indigenous population in Brazil, but we have researchers at the National School of Public Health that are working with the migrant population and other researchers who are working with the Brazilian Black population.
E uma segunda possibilidade de convergência, né, dos trabalhos tem a ver com como as dificuldades se expressam, né, em diferentes dimensões, aspectos relacionados ao sistema de saúde. Então, na ESP, nós temos grupos, né, de pesquisadores dedicados a estudos que envolvem, né, questões mais abrangentes do nosso sistema de saúde, por exemplo, questões relacionadas à avaliação do acesso, desempenho dos serviços de saúde, à gestão, financiamento, às relações público-privados, ao acesso e cuidado em saúde. Então, são outras dimensões mais afeitas ao sistema de saúde que podem ser explorados em possíveis parcerias entre as instituições.
There are other areas where we could converge our agendas. For example, the inequalities that are expressed here in Brazil in the Unified National Health System. We have numerous studies here from a broader perspective about the expressions of inequality and access to the unified health system, the performance of health systems, the management of the system, financing, the relationship between the public and private sectors in the health system as well.
Luciana, okay?
So maybe Jean-Baptiste, do you want to answer to a concept of links between inequalities and vulnerability? Maybe I just want to say something like we have some research about we have the same difficulties in France, in inequalities in access of health system. So we have also some research about that. Yeah, I think we can exchange our point of view of our systems, difficulties in equality access, and we have also some interrogation about efficiency of the health system and sustainability of the health system in France. So maybe we have some same topics, some interest covered in this field of research. And maybe, Jean-Baptiste, do you want to talk about, Philippe, of the link between vulnerability and precarity and inequalities?
Philippe, je commence ou tu commences? Okay. This is a very interesting question and not easy to answer, and I do appreciate the answer from Luciana to go back to the populations, because I believe it's easier to focus on. I think we do share the same kind of issues regarding specific population. In France and in Europe, one of the hot topic related to vulnerability, precarity, and access of care is related to aging population. Of course, and that's the issue is really not aging population, but which part is aging with good health status, good independency, and those who won't who may live until 80 or 85, 90, but with 20 years with not good health. That's one of the major issue, and is related also to precarity, social determinants, and access to healthcare. So typically that's the question where everything is related, and in this issue you also face issues related to gender. So women live longer, but have a longer part with not a good quality of life. So that's one of the hot topic I really well know. Concerning other population, we also have the topic of migrants, which is also very important at the European level, with specific course related to migrants. And when you say migrants, you also say the question of gender, because we definitely know that female migrants face two kind of inequalities. That is, they are migrants and they are women. So that's sorry, but it's really like this. And that's something really important with some research. Another hot topic is mental health. Mental health is really very important. And once again, you have this mix between a kind of vulnerability that is relational with individual characteristics and precarity. And saying this, you have also inequalities to access of care regarding your social background and your level of precarity. And we know that with the same kind of disease, you won't have the same access to care, and you won't have the same consequences on your health and longer health. And now with aging population, we face also the problem of those who have psychiatric disease but become old. And what is the most problem? Being old with psychiatric disease or having a psychiatric disease. That's also that's typically three issue. We have less indigenous issues, of course, in France. In France, it's not allowed to register or to make specific research related to ethnic groups. We are not allowed to set race. That's forbidden. So it's so. The recent events in France show that it's not. It will be interesting, but it's not allowed. So we cannot have the same research as the news. That's spontaneously some issues I can share just so.
Okay. Philippe, would you like some words?
Yes, just a general word. I think that vulnerability exacerbates inequality, and one important dimension of this inequality is indeed the unequal access to healthcare, and this is particularly obvious when it comes to access to preventive care. And this topic of prevention is very important in France and in the world, but it's very difficult to bring vulnerable people to prevention, and this preventive care is less easy for the socially disadvantaged people because of lack of information, of possibility to come to health center and so on. So it's very important for me that vulnerability, as Jean-Baptiste said, vulnerability encompasses precariousness and frailty, and it is very difficult to develop effective preventive action and efficient preventive actions in vulnerable populations. So it's a major issue in healthcare system in France, but I think in Brazil too.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can conclude this axe.
Okay, so I guess it's time for the third topic. So it's my great pleasure to introduce this topic on innovation and health. So perhaps just a few words on myself so that you know me. I'm Nathalie Mielkarek. I'm in charge of international relations for the Institute of Lille, but I'm also deputy director of the Center of Infection and Immunity of Lille that you heard about earlier, and I'm the team leader for a team working on pertussis and tuberculosis. So definitely interested by all the talks today. So it's my great pleasure first to introduce Patricia Veras, who is the former Vice Director of Education of Fiocruz, and I give her the floor.
Hi, good morning for everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for gave me the opportunity to be part of this initiative that I feel that it's very important for Fiocruz and all the researchers that could be interested in participate. And thank you very much for the invitation. I am a researcher at Fiocruz. I'm now I have finished the role of being vice director at Fiocruz Bahia, where I'm a researcher that works mainly in leishmaniasis, in the interaction of parasites and developing new therapies for controlling this disease. Could I share my screen? Yeah, probably. Sorry, 2 seconds. few seconds to take a time because I have a screen. Are you seeing the presentation already? No.
Okay,
And
we saw it and it disappeared. Okay, now it's coming.
But are you seeing the?
We saw your slides. We see your slides. Treatment
like,
of leishmania analysis. Yeah.
Like.
Now it's perfect.
It's perfect. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Because sometimes it's crazy, so yeah. I'd like to ask you. Well. First of all, I thank that the University of Lille and Institut Pasteur de Lille Fiocruz would be in another level of interactions after this interesting meeting. We decided that actually in this project is made part of a translational program for leishmaniasis that was developed by the Vice Presidents of Research and Biological Collection of Fiocruz. And I decided to present this in the idea that it's a model that we can use actually for other not communicable or other communicable diseases that were developed in all these three institutions. So it's a model that it's a proposal that we constructed in very few months. And the idea is to integrate and structure actions to develop and accelerate new initiatives in the treatment of leishmaniasis. I will try. This work has been done in collaboration, as I told you, with three colleagues: Carlos Alves from the Fiocruz in Rio de Janeiro, the Oswaldo Cruz Institute, Rubens Dumont from René Rachu, which is from the Fiocruz from Minas Gerais, and myself, that comes from Fiocruz Bahia. My presentation will divide actually in three short parts. The first part, I will convince you why we choose this model to discuss with you. Then I will present some results that we have obtained in this proposal, and finally the comments that I think that could be good for the discussion at the end. As all of us are aware, Fiocruz is a great health institute in health education. We has important technological spaces, technical competences, great scientific autonomy, and we have this program in a translational program, in translational research that is very important, and it has been initiated in the new format in the end of the last year. This program is coordinated by Dr. Simval Pinto Filho, and he has been participating in all these steps. But why leishmaniasis? Leishmaniasis is a communicable disease, neglected infectious disease, and in Brazil, we are one of the countries where this disease is the most prevalent. We have the different clinical forms of the disease in our country, and what is very good to discuss in this meeting is the fact that we are the country which, with Fiocruz, we are the institution which has the highest number of publications in leishmaniasis. Although this great experience in the field until now, we did not presented a chemotherapeutic solution for this disease, considering that the treatments that we have for control this disease have several limitations that it's not the point to discuss here in this presentation. The advantages of this complementary collaboration in this partnership, in our point of view, begins from the fact that the international partnership could provide an ideal platform and a potentiality to unite researchers with diverse and complementary skills. And we hope that the results that we can obtain, and that's the possibility of this collaborating, is prototypes for novel treatments, an increase in innovation and scientific research in a product environment, and finally, an increase as well of technological autonomy and, for Brazil at least, very important, an industrial development that could be served for health purposes. I show you now the roadmap. Shortly, I will not detail, obviously, a roadmap of this initiative that is related to therapy new targets for the translational program. This proposal initiated at the 5th October, where we initiated the discussion and created the axis. At the end of December, we have already consolidated proposals or summary of proposals of the researchers that have sent us projects that they are developing in chemotherapeutic for leishmaniasis. In March, we delivered or submitted the letter of intent for this project that I will show you later on. And I will just given a few slides regarding this idea about this group that submitted the project for our coordinations. And we can see here that we have a number of 39 members of individuals that sent us projects to participate in the axis, with variable numbers of projects according to the institutes, recalling you that Fiocruz is a national institute where we have groups, we have institutes that are distributed all over several states of Brazil. Here are the name of the institutes that are involved in this project. What I think that is most important, and it was the relevance to develop this project, is the fact that the connection among the members are very limited regarding the institute where they are connected, where they work. You can see here several hubs, small hubs of with the name of the researchers, and most of them collaborate in this hub of collaboration initiatives. We can see that most of them collaborate with researchers from the same institute. These pictures gave us an idea that it was absolutely necessary to initiate a project that could integrate these small hubs and even amplify this collaboration outside Fiocruz. Another idea that led us to develop this project regarding the proposal that were submitted was the fact that most of them were in the level, this classification was done by the researchers. Well, most of them were in the low level of development of their initiatives in leishmaniasis treatment, with very few projects involved already in clinical trials for leishmaniasis treatment. With this broad idea about the group of projects that we had in Fiocruz in this area, we submit the letter. And recently we have another meeting. We delivered a more matured project, and I will just show you the idea what we want to do in order to amplify, to improve the possibility to improve the innovation, at least in leishmaniasis field, for the development of new treatments in our institution. So the question we addressed was how to transform knowledge into new therapeutic strategies for leishmaniasis in an institution such as Fiocruz that contributes the most to the theme in the world. The principal aim was advancing the maturation, where the idea was to advance the maturation of the technologies that are part of this axis for the treatment of leishmaniasis within the technological spaces and technical competencies of Fiocruz, and also at least at Fiocruz, but with the idea of new collaborations. And this is a great opportunity to discuss this possibility in this meeting. The objectives that we lined was the first one. Oh, sorry, I'm not saying. Create a portfolio, obviously mapping the initiatives and create a portfolio of internal technologies. Oh, sorry. Validate maturity using specialists in the area. Standardize assays, which we feel that is very important, defining, standardizing, and perform preclinical trials that were standardized among the initiatives. Elaborate flow charts, standardizing and create a guide for development of anti-leishmanial drugs, focusing on the TPP. And finally, prospect for partners, seeking for strategic partners for the incorporation of disruptive technology. So we aim at the end to have as products an integrated system of actions to accelerate the discovery and development of drugs against leishmaniasis. We put here, that's very complicated slide. I just wanted to emphasize that we plan to distribute this aim in phases, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. The first are the general idea to prepare portfolio and guidelines to then standardize the preclinical tests, integrate structuring actions for preclinical trials, guidelines for clinical trials thereafter, and in the future that we can't now have an idea how many years we can do that, to have in the future leishmaniasis treatment available on the market. I would like just to show you that we did not forget that we have several. We have to consider that Fiocruz is a great institution. We have several technical characteristics that gave us the opportunity to do and perform research in a very quality and advanced way. However, we need to put these qualities integrated with considering that we are a great institution, that we have several institutes all over Brazil, and for improve this integration, we need a project that put all together to finally achieve what are our aim. Sorry, I'm not, what's happening? I'm not fast. So as legacies, we think that it's we can have in the future discovery of new therapeutic alternatives. We are going to optimize this network. We obviously consider that it's very important in our institution, the staff training and the fostering of collaborations. And finally, these development of solutions could expand Fiocruz competencies and expertises, prioritize the science, technology, and innovation, scientific development, industrial autonomy, and I put here in red the expansion of competitiveness, considering international partnerships. Finally, the groups of researchers that kindly participate and send their projects and contributed to the proposal that were written in almost 48 hands, and the coordination that I'd like to thank very much my good friends and colleagues, Carlos and Rubens. Thank you very much. I hope it did not pass time.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I think it was very interesting, and I could definitively relate that to the work which has been done at the Université of Lille regarding a new drug against tuberculosis. And it also helped to make different teams, different unit departments working together, especially people working on microbiology and like medicinal chemists who can optimize the drugs. So I think it might definitively have discussion between you and them to perhaps share expertise and share a strategic plan, you know, and because they have been quite successful, and now the drug had just finished a phase 1 clinical trial. So I guess the different step was long and difficult, and perhaps sharing expertise, but also training might be also a good idea. So if that's okay with you, I will definitely put you in contact with these people, which are Benoît Després and Alain Bollard here, because I think that you might have fruitful discussion together, definitely.
Thank you very much. I feel that it's a great opportunity for us, and we are now, our group are completely open to discuss with your group, and then we very glad to have this opportunity. Actually, I think that we will gain completely with this contact.
Thank you very much.
Send the students to be prepared, students and researchers.
We are running out of time, and I don't see any hands up. So perhaps I will give the floor to Marcos Costa for the last scientific topic. So Marcos is working at the Université of Lille, and he has Brazilian roots. So I think he's very keen to be part of this new partnership, and I will leave him the floor to present himself and present his work. Thank you, Marcos.
Thank you, Natalie. Let me just share my presentation. Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, thanks for organizing this kickoff meeting. As all of you mentioned, I mean, it's a great pleasure to be part of this initiative and contribute to this collaboration involving the university, the Pasteur Institute in Lille, and the Fiocruz in Brazil. I'm a researcher in SAM. I joined the Pasteur Institute in 2018, the end of 2018, when I started to work in induced pluripotent stem cell models to study Alzheimer's disease. But I decided to make my presentation into two parts. I mean, the first part, I will try to bring some methodologies that I believe, and I'm not only me, but most people nowadays believe they are cutting edge technologies for biomedical research in the next years. And I believe that most of these technologies, they are implemented in one of these three institutions. And I believe that we can all profit of exchanging and to improve our methods to understand biomedical questions and develop better treatments for human diseases. And then in the second part, I will briefly give an example of how I have applied some of these technologies to do biomedical research, eventually with some translational application to illustrate what I'm going to speak first. So the introduction, I mean, this is a common topic. I mean, there's a need for new models to study human diseases. We have learned a lot from animal models in the last decades, but there are some limitations, and then many failures in clinical trials to treat human disease based on knowledge acquired from animal models show the urgent need to have better models, especially capturing the complex molecular landscape of the human cells. So understanding molecular complexity and using human cells are really important aspects of biomedical research nowadays. For that, of course, the omic technologies, they really changed our way to look at the molecular complexity of biological systems, and ranging from genomics to transcriptomics, but also proteomics, and more recently metabolomics and cytomics, where we can really start to understand the molecular landscape and in many different tissues, in many different contexts in physiology and pathology. And from this large-scale data, using bioinformatic tools, we can then try to understand and to derive models to understand and identify new targets that can then be used in preclinical tests and try to develop new treatments. And here I'm just mentioning some of the platforms that we have in the Institute Pasteur that are specialized in this kind of approach, not to mention all the different laboratories that use this kind of technology and have all the expertise to analyze this kind of data. As I also mentioned, I mean, it's very important to study human cells for many reasons, and the advent of human-induced pluripotent stem cells in 2007 really allowed this leap in biomedical research. And now we are capable of generating all types of human cells in a dish. And this, of course, has allowed to model many different types of human diseases, being neurological diseases, cardiovascular diseases, liver diseases, and also open new possibilities for treating diseases where you have the loss of cell types by cell transplantation or on-site reprogramming, and even more recently, to use this kind of technology to refine clinical trials. And I think this is something particularly interesting. I have one next slide only about that. This is, of course, something that was proposed about 10 years ago, but only more recently, we start to see some clinical trials designed with this kind of strategy where we include the iPS cells in a phase 0.5, let's say, where we can have the toxicity test for the compound in iPS cells rather than in animal models. And then in between the phase 1 and phase 2, we can still use this kind of technology to select in a large population of patients based on the iPS from these patients, the ones that could be responders and no responders to the compound. And then, of course, based on that, select only the responders for the phase 2. So it's a different way to think about clinical trials and try to use the cellular models to refine the design of your clinical trial. More recently, this has also been further developed to model not only cells and tissues, but even organs. And this is a technology that comes with a lot of improvements on the way of culturing these organs in microfluidic chambers. And it's known as organ on a chip technology. And the idea here is to be able to move from either from patients or iPS cells genetically modified with carrying some genetic information that we know to be associated with some human conditions, and then differentiate our organs of interest and grow in these chips. And then, of course, here we can also think about combining different organs and try to model inter-organ communications and so on. And we are now in the stage of discussing a big cross-disciplinary program in the University of Lille and the Institut Pasteur to develop this kind of technologies. And then finally, all the data that we generate from these strategies, they are very heavy. There are many data collected. So we need also system biology and probably in the future artificial intelligence technologies to deal with all this data and try to make to take sense out of that and bring some new theories that can then be tested back in a biological system. So now I will give you an example on how these technologies can be merged to address a scientific question. And as I said, I'm working on Alzheimer's disease, and the team where I'm working is one of the leading teams in the identification of genetic risk genes for Alzheimer's disease in the world. And in the paper published last year by this team, they have identified the largest number of genes associated with a risk to develop Alzheimer's disease. And among these genes, I'm highlighting here the gene BIN1, as we can see here, using single-cell transcriptomics of the adult human brain, is mainly expressed by microglia, oligodendrocytes, and different types of neurons. And its expression decreases during Alzheimer's disease pathology. Here, 0, 2, and 6, they show early, middle, and late stage of Alzheimer's disease. So we hypothesized that decreased BIN1 expression could impact the function of neural cells, and we decided to use IPS models to manipulate the BIN1 expression using a heterozygous or knockout mutations and compare with the Y-type cells. I will not go through all the data, but we made cerebral organoids. So we created neural cells in 3D structures, and we used single-cell RNA sequencing to characterize the cells. And here we can see the main information that we got. I mean, in heterozygous and knockout cells, we get some genes differently expressed, mainly in glutamatergic neurons. So we could see that by reducing BIN1 expression in cerebral organoids, we have a specific effect in glutamatergic neurons. Then we moved to a more, to a simplest model in 2D, where we could show that in these neuronal populations, BIN1 interacts with a calcium channel, the CAV1.2, and in the absence of BIN1, this calcium channel cannot be internalized by these neurons when they are activated. And this leads to an increased expression of these calcium channels in the membrane. And then based on this information, we decided to test if by blocking these channels with a calcium channel blocker. In this case, we use nifedipine, that it's a drug that it's commonly used to treat hypertension. And we could show that by using nifedipine, we could revert the change in glutamatergic neurons, the change in gene expression and alpha activity, I'm not showing here, in glutamatergic neurons that we found after BIN1 deletion. So we could move from the genetic information to an IPS model, identify what was changing in which cell type, and revert that with some drug that potentially could be repurposed in the future to treat Alzheimer's disease. And I'll skip that. Now, more recently, we are starting to generate multicellular models to study not only the cell-autonomous role of genes in neurons, but also to study how these genetic mutations in other cells, such as astrocytes and microglia, can interfere with neurons. So we are therefore building models to study intercellular communication, neuron interactions, and so on. And I believe that these kind of models can be applied to address common questions in many different tissues where a chronic inflammation and infection can be important, and not only in a single cell, but affecting some cells that can indirectly affect other cells. So this is really a toolbox that can be applied to model many different types of diseases. And I hope that I could give you a flavor on how we can use this kind of strategies. So to finish, I think I could convince you that the biomedical research is really experiencing a paradigm shift. And I really believe that this partnership that we are designing will contribute to leverage the research performed in all these big institutions and help to make a very important discovery for human health in the future. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marcos. That was very interesting. Is there any question for Marcos?
Can I ask you something, Marcos? Thank you very much for your interesting presentation, Marcos. Do you, in your lab, you work in this organ model for Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease?
Alzheimer's, yeah.
Do you have colleagues or in your lab, is there any group that work with skin models for, because it's very interesting to test in cutaneous leishmaniasis, for example, to test for drugs in the topical use for the treatment. So I think that could be interesting if you can talk and if there is any possibility to develop this this model in your lab or in any group that work with that, and we can try to bring it to Brazil.
So no, not that I know. Since I joined the institute and started working on IPS, many people came to discuss with me and start to work in different model systems. I know that some people are developing lung organoids, intestine organoids, and Fernando is trying to develop bone marrow organoids. And now we are starting also to discuss the possibility to do liver organoids and even pancreatic organoids. But skin, so far nobody came. Maybe someone is working on that, and I'm not aware, but I don't know.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So perhaps for our Brazilian colleagues, so do you work in Fiocruz, in some lab of Fiocruz on organoids or organ on chip, and would that be something that you would be interested to develop there?
Are you asking me? No, Marcos. I know that we have a group. There are several groups that work mostly for cancer analysis, the treatments and even pathogenesis they are developing. Particularly here in Salvador, we have a group very strong that work in organoid for cancer. Doutora Clarissa Gurgel, but I think that in Fiocruz Wilson maybe Sabino can be complement, but I'm sure that there are other groups that do that at Fiocruz.
Yes, there is a group at Fiocruz in the state of Paraná, in the south of Brazil, working on using human IPS to drive to organoids. I've been personally involved in developing organoids for building up a thymus in vitro, using thymic epithelial cells as the basic cell to be interacted with immature lymphocytes. And then that's what I know for sure.
Okay, but that's something perhaps we can discuss also, for future collaboration and perhaps also for training, which could be also an interesting point.
Yeah, this is for sure, because one of the things that it's not yet appeared in the literature of Fiocruz, let's say, is that Fiocruz is developing a huge program on advanced therapies, and one part of this will be generating gene therapy and cell-based therapy, not only for cancer but also for rare diseases. And this is in the very beginning, so it will be useful, such kind of interaction with Marcos for sure.
Okay, interesting. And perhaps the last question after we need to close up because we're a bit late, but Marcos, you mentioned shortly the use of artificial intelligence to do something with all the data that you collect. And I think also that's something that we all have to go for that, because with all the new technology and the omics field, we collect so many data. So, to do something with that. And I was wondering whether in Fiocruz you also working on intelligence, artificial intelligence, or do you plan to do that, or is that something that we should as partners think about?
Yes, actually, again, this is in the beginning as well. It is one of the strategies for the near future at Fiocruz. And I'm saying that because it has been discussed at the level of the vice presidents of production and innovation in health. And personally, I know a group at Fiocruz Ceará in the northeast of Brazil using artificial intelligence to design drug targets and even to design molecular interactions by computational science.
Yeah, I think that's a field that we all need to explore. I mean, again, I'm more on the vaccine field, but we discuss a lot about the use of intelligence, artificial to design, new or like RNA molecules that you were saying, optimization, or just,
But I think, Savino, that I'm sorry. I think that the challenge is the integration of these different omics to analyze. Obviously, if you use for drug targeting and analysis interactions, it's okay. But the omics situation, I think that's very, very complex. And I think that Fiocruz obviously can focus on that as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that we'll close now.
There is a question here in the in the YouTube from Marina Mourão. She's asking if I would work with any kind of organoids. No, I wouldn't work with all kinds of organoids. I mainly work with brain organoids, cerebral organoids, but I would be happy to share expertise in maintenance of IPS. I mean, this is probably one of the most critical steps, and many people starting work with this fail in this very beginning. I mean, just to keep the IPS in a good state and undifferentiated state. And if you don't have that, you can even not think of starting growing any type of organoids. So yeah, I mean, usually that's what I try to do with colleagues here. I mean, to share this expertise and transfer technology to start with the very beginning, and then they can move by themselves for the next steps to differentiate into the tissue or the organ of interest.
Thank you. So it's time for the closing remarks. And the first speaker will be Vinicius on behalf of Christina Guillam. Vinicius.
Thank you, Didier. Thank you, everybody. I think that was really a very complex but very fruitful discussion that in this kickoff meeting. First of all, I need to thank very much Didier and Didier Gosset and Joseph Soba for helping with trying to put all these researchers together from three complex institutions to have all this discussion here. That's really a kickoff meeting. And of course, to also acknowledge our team here, your team there, that for all the support for this kickoff meeting. Of course, this is a closing remark. I don't need to come over. The idea is not really to say all the main points discussed here, but I just want to point some important discussions that I saw for the subsequent organization that we planned. The idea is from all this discussion here as an open discussion to bring all the complexities of our research that you could see already for these few questions and few deep discussions, how much we can do together. Then I think the main point here is to point that for the topic 1 on infectious disease that you saw all the questions from Professor Barral, Professor Seneville, Professor Debuisson. I mean, there are many important links that we can make, as Robineau said in the beginning when he said from the bench to the bed from the bench, meaning that we can get really specific basic topics on parasite biology or microbiology and all the clinical related questions that Professor Seneville also brought up. And this is just to point some stuff. And for that, I need to mention that we have Fernando Real and Mathieu Gitsot, along with Marina Mourão from Lille. And from Fiocruz, we have Marina Mourão and Dumitschek and Buhabib to be in charge, to organize, to pick some of these discussions that they are already moving on that. This is just to mention. On the second topic, we saw Eduardo and Thomas Mongejo organizing this also very relevant issue that we, as Professor Gosset said in the beginning, we really picked up in the beginning from our initial discussions, which should be some key point on that. And we could see, for example, just to mention one, the question about vulnerabilities on the health assistance, on the health systems, how this could be really a point that can be really further explored. It is very nice that Luciana, Jean-Baptiste, and Philippe could discuss on some of these points, and this for sure. And in this third topic, you could see exactly the discussions from our main focal points on that discussion on innovation in healthcare from Patricia Veras and from Marcos Costa on specific points on methods and innovation. And of course, even if you mix with other points that they made in terms of how you can modelize some of these treatments, how can you advance these methods that Savino also pointed out, and Nathalie also on artificial intelligence, on advanced therapies. For sure, this is a challenge, a nice challenge that you can proceed discussing these next seminars, specific seminars for this group, and also even mix a little bit with the other groups. I think this is an interesting point that I want to bring it up here. And of course, thank you very much for all, and we have a lot of work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinicius. Nathalie? Nathalie, it's your go.
Sorry. Well, thank you. So yes, indeed, I think it was a very interesting discussion, and it's just the beginning, let's say. It's just to launch, and now we need to move on and to think about how we can make that more concrete and have a project together that we can share. But first, I'd like to really thank Didier Gosset and Joseph Armando, who also came to us and to initiate also and to be part of this partnership. I think it's a great idea. And for sure, we already have this collaboration with Fiocruz through the Pasteur Network, but I think to have the university together will really bring a new impulse, I would say, and we can see that already with this discussion. So I think there's a lot of possibility to collaborate. I guess also to make it work, we should perhaps try to focus, on one topic, one main project on each topic to make it work, to make it as an example. We are, as Vinicius mentioned, we already have some young, everything depends on age, but I would say young researcher now, and Marcos is one of them, but also Fernando and many others who will be definitively involved, I think, in making this link more concrete. And I think it looks good, let's say. We will have lots of opportunity and we can perhaps further discuss. And for sure, we will see, I think in September, we'll begin the new webinar for more specific topics or project. And after we'll really have to discuss, I think training will be important, exchange of people will be important, and how we can find funding together. So that's the next step. So thanks again, and I give the floor to Didier Gosset to conclude. Thank you again.
Thank you, Nathalie. So after hearing these wonderful presentations, we have reached the very end of this kickoff meeting for our partnership. I want to thank all the participants for their presence and their participation. And also, I want to thank the technical assistants here in Lille and also in Rio, because they had to get up very early this morning to test the connection, to prepare everything. Thank you very much. Now we'll leave it up for the researchers to collaborate and work together. As you mentioned, we have many very promising tracks to explore. I would like also to mention that this meeting has been recorded, and you will be able to see it again very soon, maybe today, I think, on YouTube. So I'll give you an appointment in November for the signing of the agreement. And thank you very much, everybody, and bye-bye. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. See you also.
Bye. Bye. See you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.